This art drama, or what people allegedly say, is one of the biggest dramas in the Magic the Gathering community. It involves a really popular, famous artist and alleged art tracing. So let's delve into this entire situation. This all kicks off with a post on Facebook May 1st written by Donato Giancola, who is also a really big goat of the art community. They have won a lot of notable awards in the art space, including the Hugo Award, and have worked on a lot of really major titles, one of them being Magic the Gathering. So Donato writes, The One Ring, 7 inches by 9 inches oil on panel 1997, from the Middle-earth collectible card game. Wizards of the Coast just released a very sorry excuse for the most important card in their upcoming Hobbit set, which, by the way, Wizards of the Coast is the publisher for Magic the Gathering. The original one, they were later acquired by a company called Hasbro in like 1999. Donato continues, they just digitally sampled the previous One Ring card from the Lord of the Rings set and flipped and deleted the Elvish runes. I doubt Dan Frazier had any real say in how this came about. Dan is the other extremely notable and popular artist that is part of this controversy. Donato continues, so much for the One Ring being unique. Welcome to Wizards of the Coast digital-only universes beyond photocopied art. So this is Donato's painting, and here we have the card from Magic the Gathering featuring a ring on the card. But here is a different card. So here we can take a look at the two cards. This is a card called the One Ring, where as you can see, there's a hand grabbing the ring. This is allegedly from the Hobbit sets, and the artist credit goes to Marta Nail. I hope I'm saying their name right. And this is the other ring, the One Ring card, and the art credit for this one is Dan Frazier. Again, a really notable, really popular artist. But here in this image, Donato puts the two rings side by side, flip the other cards so they actually match up in terms of the placement. And you can see when looking at the two cards that they look really similar. Like if we look over here, you can see the highlights completely match, right? The highlight on Marta's card completely matches up with the highlight here. There is a dark shadow streaking below that highlight. That dark shadow is also present here as well. Notably, there is like an N-shaped scratch in the inside of the ring. That is also present on Dan's piece. And then over here, there's two little dots. It kind of looks like a stick figure person kind of standing here. That is also visible in Dan's piece, as well as the shadow shape. This one's kind of shaped like a little bit of a heart. That is also here. And the highlight at the very top, note there's like a line kind of scraping into the top of the ring on both sides. That line is also there as well. So it most definitely looks like Marta's ring asset was just taken and then painted over a little bit and flipped to be used as the ring in this card. This is another post made on Twitter by a user named Joey Pasco talking about this whole situation, showing Donato's Facebook post. But commenters are mainly on the side of Dan Frazier because, again, he is such a notable and popular artist who has worked on a lot of Magic cards. People writing, ridiculous that Wizards seemingly believe that Dan Frazier of all people is incapable of drawing magical jewelry. Other people are saying, wait, so maybe Dan submitted a background by itself and you put your name on it? And Joey responds that that background seems to be part of Dan's work because it seems to be a hallmark of his art style. And again, people were like, did Dan plagiarize this? OP says, I don't think this is Dan's doing. The word is he painted the ring, but somewhere along the line, it was covered up by this cutout from Nail's art. And again, that kind of makes sense, right? Because for context, Dan is also like 80. So if you are an artist with such a vast amount of artwork under your belt that you've delivered quality work for such a long period of time, people probably are going to be on your side when it comes to a situation like this because it's like, oh, well, you have such a long history of delivering quality work. There's no way. There had to be like a misunderstanding, right, in this case. But then Magic the Gathering put out a statement. So on their official Twitter page, they write, a message from Dan Frazier and Wizards of the Coast. So the combined message reads, recently, fans noted the similarities between The One Ring by Marta Nail and the newly released image of The One Ring by Dan Frazier. Those similarities are not coincidental, unfortunately. Then it reads, from Dan. And Dan writes, I made a mistake and I feel awful. Especially for Marta, whose work I adore. In trying to create an iconic version of the One Ring, while looking at references online, I ended up using Marta's ring as a reference and painted over it to try to depict the item fans hold dear to their hearts. In doing so, I didn't make it my own. I'm reaching out to Marta privately to apologize artist to artist. I love creating art for Magic. I've loved being a part of this artist community for more than 30 years, and I'm sorry I let my fans down. Sincerely, Dan Frazier. And Wizards of the Coast writes, Dan Frazier is a titan of the art industry and of Magic the Gathering. He has created so many iconic pieces of art for the game that he will forever be a part of our game, and we value his contributions tremendously. With that in mind, we're disappointed our review process did not catch the issue. Like Dan, we have already reached out to apologize to Marta Nail for not catching the use of her art in this piece. None of this was intentional, but we're gonna make it right as much as we can. On digital versions of the card, we will credit both Dan Frazier and Marta Nail. We will also make sure Marta is compensated for her work here. This is a good moment to recognize that we are all humans who make mistakes. Dan made a mistake. We made mistakes in our process to not catch the error. We don't condone or accept either, but we still value Dan and his contributions and are grateful for his place in the game. Thank you to the eagle-eyed fans who noticed this, and for all of you for being strong advocates for amazing art and artists. Sincerely, all of us at Wizards of the Coast. And after this statement, fans really felt some type of way about it. We have people overlapping the ring one on top of another and writing things like, did they actually just smudge tool out the inscriptions, be so for real? Which, yeah, it kind of just looks like that. Don't take other people's art and paint over unless you have permission, like explicit permission from the artist. But also, this was like not even a good attempt at remaking it. It literally looks like you smudge tooled it out and was like, I'm done. Right. So what's interesting on Donato's post, allegedly Dan's agent, so this person named Mark, in response to Donato writing, I doubt Dan Frazier had any real say in how this came about, the agent said Dan did not. After several changes requested, we never saw this version. Then Donato responds in sympathy towards the agent, and the agent says, I'm looking forward to returning from MagicCon and have Dan show me his final piece. I have not seen it. He got so frustrated with them making changes to his stuff. I saw some early attempts. And again, other people were talking heavily in support for Dan, being like, I purchased work from Dan like 25 years ago. It was amazing. I love it. Had a great experience. Like, I love Dan as an artist, blah, 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 blah. So it's really interesting to have this as the statement come out from Magic the Gathering, where I'm curious about your thoughts. How do you think this actually played out? Do you think this was something where Dan legitimately just painted over somebody else's work, tried passing it off as like a quick hack job, and then got caught? Or do you think there was some more upper management meddling alongside this? Because we do have the situation where the agent said that Dan and the agent allegedly have not seen that version of the card, which is the version with the copied ring. This is a theory on Twitter where somebody writes, here's my guess of what actually happened. Wizards of the Coast gave Dan Frazier, who is 80, an extremely tight deadline for a one-ring chase card. 2, Middle-earth Enterprises decided they didn't like how the ring was depicted at the last minute. 3, somebody did a rushed hack job to change the art. Another conspiracy theory floating around reads, Conspiracy Theory Time. Magic the Gathering controversy over stolen art being used on the new printing of the One Ring. But look at the background, how it matches with several other cards he has done, but not the ring. And it's zoomed in. Here are some close-up screenshots of other work done by Dan, and as you can see, the background has this really notable marbling style. Here is another work, but one thing that's also very interesting you can see is that the object being shown in the card matches the marbled background. It blends in like very, very completely and matches the environment. We can see that here. And also note the marbling style. The lines are very, very fine and very, very intricate. Whereas here we have this card and the ring looks like it doesn't belong at all. It looks like it was photoshopped. And the marbling as well doesn't necessarily look like the same marbling style that Dan has done in previous cards. So OP writes, Dan Frazier painted a piece of art. Somebody at Wizards cropped out his depiction of the One Ring and pasted the version by Marta Nail over the top. The distance between the marbled veins is inconsistent with how he has painted marble in the past. Which, by the way, what OP is saying, which like some people were getting, is they were just talking about how like the marbling, the distance between the lines were so far apart in that most recent card, and that their conspiracy, I'm assuming what they meant is that, you know, maybe Dan delivered something like this and was like, here's my final thing. And then somebody somehow was like, not really feeling it. We're just gonna yoink. All right, now we have a Dan background, Pog, and then let us just go and, I don't know, Photoshop and paste a really poorly drawn ring, boop, right on top. All right, here's your card, guys, you're done. Because again, the veins in Dan's other cards, all real close together. These ones, kind of far apart. So I don't know, that's a conspiracy theory. What are your thoughts? So Donato posted another update after all this stuff about Dan came out, writing, edit, in light of Dan Frazier's recent comments and post by Wizards of the Coast, I need to retract my defense of Dan in this massive mishap on the One Ring card. My criticisms still stand, just now the blame is split between Dan and the Wizards. The issues around Universes Beyond and their contracts are still at the root of the problem. So Donato basically continues that this is part of Hasbro's failure in their mismanagement of Magic the Gathering, and that there are exploitative contracts imposed by Wizards of the Coast on artists working. And Donato states that in the past 2 months, they've spoken with hundreds of students and professional artists in the freelance marketplace, talking to them, and everybody has been complaining about working with Wizards of the Coast and Magic the Gathering. And this is actually wild. So allegedly, Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast currently require artists to sign a work-for-hire digital-only art contract on the Universes Beyond sets, meaning the artist cannot create any original art. So sketches, no thumbnails, no color studies, blah, 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 paintings, any physical painted creative works, nor create aftermarket sketches, prints, playmats, or are there any artist proofs. Basically, Donato states that Wizards has stripped away all aftermarket capabilities for artists to leverage to make a living, given how low and poor the upfront fee is. So this was apparently used for the Hobbit sets, and that Donato alleges that in the One Ring debacle that has been cooked up, that these exploitative conditions lead to creative shortcuts, lack of quality control because Hasbro laid off thousands of employees, and lack of quality art delivered by commission artists because they need to cut corner knowing there's no other way to go recoup their labor by making money from aftermarket sales. And Donato has done some math using the Lord of the Rings set release as an example, as a rough conservative estimate of aftermarket value loss experienced by Magic artists because there's a digital only art contract. So it's estimated that there's about like a $3.1 million aftermarket loss because these artists, again, cannot sell proof sets, prints, playmats, repaints, paintings, etc. as part of these contracts. So Donato adds that Wizards of the Coast offers an additional $1,250 fee per card compensation to help offset that loss. It's short of the average $6,300 in potential aftermarket sales per card. And they add also that for the recent Lorin Eclipse set, the average sale of an original finished painted art came in at $3,478 based on 122 publicly noted sales. That because the Lord of the Rings set is way more high profile, it is very reasonable to estimate that the aftermarket loss would be about $5,000 per card. And that this also hurts artists' abilities to connect with their fans because they can't make art or the stuff. And Donato adds that Wizards of the Coast needs to cease using these exploitative work-for-hire digital-only contracts on Universes Beyond. And they urge that you don't buy the Hobbit set. And Donato also adds that they stopped working with Wizards of the Coast over 2 years ago due to these very contractual conditions. And again, if this isn't enough where people are already not happy with Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast, well, Wizards of the Coast have actually, allegedly, been revealed to have lied in the past. We have this article by Wargamer, and this was in January 8th, 2024, so exactly almost 2 years ago, a little bit more than that, titled Wizards Apologizes for Breaking AI Art Promise with Magic the Gathering ad. Essentially, the TLDR is they put out ads for the Magic set and they basically lied and was like, no, we didn't use AI for this. And then later they admitted they used AI. And if you're wondering, this is what the ad looked like. Which, by the way, I want to add, December 19, 2023, so this was 3 weeks before that ad debacle happened, they put out this post on their website writing, yep, not changing. We require artists, writers, and creatives to refrain from using generative AI. So they literally put this out December 19th, 2023. 3 weeks later, rolled out with this ad, then lied and was like, nope, we didn't use AI, guys. And then later admitted they actually did use AI. Like literally January 7th, 2024, they had this post. And they allege that the art came from a vendor, but that it's on them to double check the work that comes in. So curious on your thoughts about this. So yeah, this entire thing is a massive, massive debacle. At the end of the day, the main person affected is Marta Nail, who in some way processed whomever's to blame, had their art taken, painted over, and used as the artwork for a card without compensation, right? Now, obviously, because this all was revealed, now Marta's name's going to be credited as well, and they're also going to be compensated. But like, this wouldn't have happened unless the internet caught it, right? So truly, I feel so bad for Marta. You work so hard on a card, it's beautiful, and then somebody just yoinks it somehow in the process. But also, there's such conspiracy theories surrounding the Dan Frazier situation and whether he himself actually painted over or somebody else did it and then made him take the fall for it. So a little update about the Dan situation. Dan went on Facebook 8 hours ago to write a post that says, about the ring controversy, I screwed up. It was my fault. So here we do have Dan admitting to the fact that he himself made the mistake. Curious about your thoughts about this entire situation. And again, please don't send hate to any parties involved. And with that, if you like this video, I appreciate it if you like and subscribe. Do you play Magic? Magic is a card game that I personally really do enjoy. I played a little bit of it and then I went over to play Riftbound. So I literally just came back from like a pre-release event actually, which I got bodied in, but it was fun. Don't forget to check me out on Etsy or on My Coffee. I have free resources for streamers and creators. I also stream on Twitch 3 days a week, Mondays and Saturdays at 6 p.m. and Thursdays at 7:30. So I hope to catch y'all there or in another one of my videos. Peace.